Welcome to episode 4 of Discover E's 2021 Persist series, our monthly virtual speaker series connecting thousands of women across the world for uplifting conversations to help us thrive and persevere in engineering and technology careers. I can't wait for you to meet our 2 inspiring speakers who work in renewable and sustainable energy at Bechtel Corporation's London office. We will be talking about navigating unspoken gender norms and embracing our own personal ways of leading and working. Please join me in welcoming Caroline Metcalf and Emma Harniman.
Hi, I'm Caroline, and I joined Bechtel back in 1987 as a graduate chemical engineer, doing roles from construction, project management, engineering, contracts, and the like. I'm now in business development, and I am with our energy transition group, and I am heading up the carbon capture for the UK. In the past, I spent time doing long-distance offshore racing, yacht racing, that helped build up stamina, but taught me a lot about teams. And then also one design racing. But these days I'm more towards rewilding and trying to do my bit for net zero.
Hi, I'm Emma. I'm also trained as a chemical engineer and joined Bechtel as a graduate in 1993. So I was an environmental engineer, then I became the chief environmental engineer for the oil and gas division of Bechtel, both London and Houston. And then more recently I've gone into engineering management. My current role is the project engineering manager for a gas plant in Egypt that we've just got up and running. I've travelled extensively to job sites and to other Bechtel offices all around the world to meet people, to gather data and to get my job done. Outside of work, I've also had leadership roles. So in my 20s, I was a Cub Scout leader. In my 30s, I got into dinghy sailing, so teams of 2 racing against each other. And then more recently, I've had 2 children who are now 9 and 11.
So Emma, thanks very much for including me in this talk today. I had to think really hard about this question, and I sort of felt it was probably necessary to go back into my early career days to understand how my leadership style had developed. So having joined Bechtel, my first assignment was overseas in the Middle East on a construction site, and I was the only woman. And the role models I had around me, the leaders, the managers, were male, charismatic and loud. So fortunately, in the early 90s, Bechtel started rolling out leadership training and behaviour and personality styles and teaching us a lot more about all the different ways of leadership. And this is because, before it had been very much shoot the messenger and then ask questions. But it was a really unique sort of opportunity for me to understand that there was different styles, that you could be unique, you could be different, and it was okay, and they all work. And so I really benefited from learning from that. And I sort of look back, and I'm glad that we went through that process with Bechtel of learning, and we all learnt together.
That's a good point, Caroline. I've obviously done the same thing and look back at how I started learning. Actually, my first formal leadership training was in the Scout Association when I became a Cub Scout leader. And we were taken away for weekends at a time. So not only did we learn how to pitch tents and light campfires, but we also got taught about different styles of communication, different styles of learning and different styles of leadership, both to help the children, but also while working with other adult volunteers. And that kind of opened my eyes to other ways of leading teams of people and was very different to the management style I saw in the office at the time, which was, people sitting in big offices being summoned to them when you'd misbehaved as far as they were concerned, and then turning up at meetings and telling everyone how it was going to be and didn't really do a lot of listening. And then, as you said, we started rolling out leadership training at work, and I actually did a diploma in management with a team of people from work, where we then looked and studied different theories and of organisational behaviour, of learning styles, of communication styles, of different ways of leading. And that led me to fully understand that there wasn't one way to do things. There was different styles needed for different situations. So if you were trying to solve a big problem, then getting people around a table, discussing, listening, brainstorming was the way to do things. If you were in crisis mode, then yes, you could be dictatorial, but that should be a very small part of your week, not every 5 minutes. So I came out of that realising that not only you use different styles, but you also needed to communicate with people in different ways, and different people would respond to different styles of communication. So it was really good learning, and I think as an organisation we learnt a lot through that process.
Yeah, I think going through those different styles, I was very fortunate to have experience of both good and bad leadership styles. And with the bad leadership styles, that you live and work on a project, you see the motivation of the team really dropping, and it's really hard. Every day is hard to go in to work. And then, you live under a sort of a good leader, and it just brings out a lot of different aspects. So I had to sort of think about why, what was it that made that a bad leader? And it was the lack of trust, and that sort of like having to report every 24 hours our performance and results, the micromanaging and the lack of authority. And the biggest thing that stood out to me, though, was the lack of, backing up your team in front of the customer, being there to really be sort of the backup and the support. However, under a good leader, you're motivated, and there was that trust and that sort of recognition that sort of, no matter what decision you make, you were going to be fully supported. That leader sort of said, I'll be 100% behind you, as long as you can justify and demonstrate why you've made a decision. Absolutely no questions about it, and would provide that support 100%. And that, the feeling of that and going into work with that support is a totally different environment.
Absolutely. No, I think, again, looking back at the different people I've worked for, you learn as much by observing other people as you do in a classroom and learning theory. And as I already mentioned, I worked for some not so motivational managers early in my career, but more, in the 2000s onwards, I had some great managers, both male and female, who taught me a lot about how I wanted to be led, and therefore how, now I'm leading, I should behave. So one of those was around training and development by the functional manager at the time, really encouraging people to do training, to put career plans together. People started doing that and became more motivated along the way, because if you keep learning as well as doing your job, then you do your job better, but you're also more motivated, so you do your job better. So it's a positive spiral, and so therefore I've encouraged my team to both do their own learning, to teach other people, to be mentors, to be mentees, and to keep developing themselves. And another thing I observed was I was on a project with a big team reorganisation, and the then female project director spent a lot of time really looking at all the different people she had within the team and how they could be reorganised to really play to different people's strengths, but also keep a really diverse team. So a lot more women were promoted within that team perhaps than I expected, because she really looked at the quality of the people rather than those that shouted loudest or were the most extrovert. And she did a great job in reorganising everyone, both different organisations, because it was a very multi-organisational team, a lot more women, a lot more just general diversity, that meant that going forward we were a much more positive team, more creative ideas, and everyone felt really good and everyone felt they'd kind of won something out of that process, and we went forward as a really strong organisation with a positive project environment.
That's a really good point you make, Emma, on diversity and diversity in teams. And it really does make a big difference. So back in the early 2000s, it was my first experience of working with other women. On a construction site, there weren't really many women out there. And I then had a couple of women join my team. And that was, I was scared. It was unique. I've been, the one and only on site for a long time. So it was really insightful and a great experience. These women joined my team. The team collaboration changed gear. And the work between the team, everybody started supporting one another more and offering help more. And, it was fun. It really was fun having that gender balance, just brought some different things to the team. And the one thing I sort of reflect back on now is that, the guys actually felt that they could ask for help. They hadn't before, but, with that mixed team, they were much more willing and open to actually asking for help, saying, hey, can you give me a hand with this? And so diversity, as a company, we've always done well because, going on these projects, they're always, multicultural. We have, normally 40 different nationalities on site that we have to work through, and manage, for our safety and everything. But, that gender balance really did make a difference.
Yeah, I've not been on a project where we've had more women than men, absolutely, but I've worked for some female bosses and had a number of female colleagues. Still would like more. And it does make, it is slightly different. There's slightly less competition and more collaboration and supporting each other and trying to get to the best result. In the role I do outside of work as chair of governors, our governing board is about 14 people, but it is 50-50 men and women, different ages, different ethnic backgrounds. And we're there to support the school, to challenge them, but to support them. And I really feel with that nice, broad diversity, we do that very effectively. And it's a really sort of positive team of people to work with.
Yeah, I think there's another aspect of diversity that I want to include is that, through my sailing, when we do these long distance offshore racing, we also work with Sailability, which was bringing sort of disabled people on board as well. And not only was the owner of one of the regular yachts I used to race had polio, but we had one lady came on and joined us one time with who was blind. So we did all the usual gaffes at the beginning, sort of like pull the blue rope and pull them sort of. And we then put this lady on the helm, and she actually worked out to be the best helm we've ever had. Being able to keep that yacht sailing really fast, trimmed. It was really a great experience to sort of like, everybody's got some strengths and you've got to learn about everybody in your team to sort of like work out the strengths and get the best so the team's really performing.
That's a really good point, because everybody has their weaknesses, in that particular case, blindness, but they also have their strengths. And the more you can get to know your team and understand where their strengths lie and not dismiss them because of their weaknesses, makes for a much better team and much happier colleagues.
Okay, so one of the things I think where we do differ is that we are always approachable, having that door open and being accessible to our team and others to be able to come in and talk to us whenever. And I've got one example when I was on a construction site in Oman, where an Indian foreman came up to me and he said he was really concerned about how a job was getting done. And, he's saying he was being asked to do it unsafely. So I said, well, thank you for coming to me. Let's go over to the area and the site, and I shut down the job, and then I escalated the situation internally. And the outcome was that 24 hours later, that supervisor that had been instructing this foreman was removed from site. And I had to think about why did he come to me when he could have gone to a number of other people, managers, other superintendents and supervisors that were around on the site. I thought it was maybe, that I am visible. I do spend a lot of time talking to different people across the site at all levels, and that I had authority, and that also But perhaps it was because I was a woman and that I was approachable, and he thought I would listen and I would hear him. And he was right.
Almost every project I worked on, we've co-located, so we've all been on the same project floor. And yes, we have our big formal meetings, but I try and drop by their office and encourage them to do the same to me, because it's in those conversations on the side that actually you learn more about them and you work out what's making them tick, what are their real drivers to get the project done. Because I've been on some projects where it's been so frosty, let's say, of an atmosphere where no one's really talking to each other properly. It's all got very transactional and quite aggressive at times, where, oh, well, that's not in our contract. Oh, well, that's what we want done. And actually by building relationships, by having those more ad hoc conversations, by really trying to listen and find out what it is that they really want out of the project, just helps build relationships and create a much better project environment, and you're much more likely to deliver what the client really wants. Because sometimes, schedule really is king, because they've signed offtake agreements and they have to make a certain production date. But other times it's, they want to build up the local community. They really want us to work hard and make sure that the local community comes along with the project. And when we find that out, we can do something about it. Like we working up in northwest Canada, and we sent one of our community relations people to actually live up there and talk to everybody and find out what was going on and be our eyes and ears on the ground, so we weren't just some remote body trying to do a feed design. So listening, communicating, still seeing the best in your client, not assuming that they're just out to mess you about. It's something I try and bring to a project, and I've seen other people, but I've also seen people not do that.
Yeah, that's really important, Emma, because co-locating with your customer really helps to build that relationship, that informal dialogue that you can have with them, and how you can sort of get a better understanding of what is behind this project. And likewise, being on projects where the driver has not actually been schedule or cost, but it's been about bringing skills and jobs to a region. And we could have missed that completely if we didn't, have those discussions with the customer and really try and understand them more. And with that understanding, we were able to change our strategy and execution on this project, where we were able to set up a training school. We trained 800 young Omanis in job skills and trade skills, as well as, I'm really proud of this, 80 young Omani women that we then had working building ridge ventilators for these aluminium smelter pot rooms, which was, fantastic. But we could have completely missed that without those informal discussions and understanding and trying to really understand what motivates the customer.
And it's also important with our own team. It's quite easy to misunderstand people if you don't stop and get to know them and have those side conversations. It's been one of the really hard bits of the pandemic that we've been stuck on Teams calls with our team for the last year. And so you don't get those little chats at the coffee machine, or a walk at lunchtime, or a beer in the evening, where you can get to know people better, understand what makes them tick, both understand what they're trying to get out of their work life, but also what's going on in their personal life. Because often, the two do get entwined, and a stress at home causes stress at work, or a stress at work causes stress at home. And people need flexibility now and again. And the more you understand them and what their background is, the much easier it is to give them some support when they need it, and the flexibility when they need it to sort something else out that suddenly has become more important than work. I remember years ago when we were moving house and buying a house for the first time, didn't think it was going to be that stressful a situation, but it was, and I was quite aware that I wasn't fully focused on work at that point. And that's helped me see, more recently, when I can see other colleagues going through stresses at home, that you need to give them a bit of slack at work while they get other things sorted out, and then they'll be back totally focused once that's done.
That's so important, a bit of that flexibility and that empathy, I think, with your team, and being able to flex. But you need to know, and have spent time talking to them, to understand what's going on outside of work, as well as inside of work. And that's really important, to sort of, spend that time talking to them, sort of saying, well, what have you done at the weekend, and how's the family doing, and really sort of like it helps then have that trust that when there are situations that you can provide that flex. And I know we've all been, like you, in situations where we need that flexibility and understanding from our managers, our line managers. And I think looking back, at the beginning, early in my career, we never had that. There was no flexibility. It was black and white. And it wasn't a nice feeling.
No, it did.
So I don't know about you, Emma, but I feel awkward when somebody says, I've done a good job. I don't see it as me. I always think that whatever we do, whatever my output is because of a team, and it's a team effort. And I know that I use the we word a lot more rather than I, because I think it's very much a collaboration, and everybody counts in everything that we do, being able to win work, perform work, deliver well. I know we're told in a lot of things that women need to say I more and recognise that it's a lot of their input, but it's at the sacrifice of not recognising the team. So for me, it's very much a we, and the team comes first.
Yeah, no, I quite agree. And I think looking back on kind of some of the more recent books I've read, servant leadership comes to mind as a kind of style of leadership that I try and emulate, where you're there for the team, you're there to serve the team, to make sure that they've got the tools, the knowledge, the ability to get on with their job and succeed, because by them succeeding, the whole team succeeds and you succeed too. And I think that's such a long way from where we came back in the early 90s and the sort of leadership styles that we were exposed to when we both started our careers. And I feel a lot more happier in current leadership styles than I do in those ones.
I think you've summed that up really well, Emma, in that we nurture and we're here to facilitate that team and getting the best performance out of that team and making sure it's fun.
Absolutely. We all like a bit of fun.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people who move into leadership have a bit of a natural attribute, but you're right, it may be just because that interests them rather than, you're born a leader. And certainly I've learned a huge amount as I've grown. I mean, I wasn't a leader at school, I wasn't head girl or anything like that. So I don't think I was born a natural leader. I've just been interested, wanted to develop, always wanted to learn, done a lot of training, done a lot of observation, and so I've ended up in a leadership role. A lot of my colleagues probably aren't interested in that at all, but they might still be leading a team of 1 or 2 people, or even just within a little team of people who are kind of all at the same level, take a lead in a certain activity. So I think everybody does some kind of leadership. It's just some people are more interested in it and more, develop that side of them more than others.
There's another part to it, is that I think we spend a lot of time influencing as opposed to leading now, especially here in Bechtel. We have a matrix organisation, and you don't necessarily have a lot of people actually working directly or reporting directly to you, and you're having to influence how people, want to work and what they want to perform as well.
That's a really good point, because actually, although I have about 30 people reporting to me at the moment, for the last 10 years I had nobody report to me. And I have had to develop, particularly being an environmental engineer, when you're often the only person in that discipline on a project, so you're only leading yourself, but you are influencing without authority on a mega scale. So that's a skill I've had to learn just because of the discipline I came up through. Thinking back through my career and my early career, being that woman in, I was the one environmental engineer, and I'd often have to report to the project manager, who was very old school, let's say. And he would occasionally put me in a very awkward situation that I felt very weak and vulnerable, and did cry on 1 or 2 occasions. And that was a horrible situation to be in. But I haven't seen anything like that for a very long time. And I think, having kind of gone through a lot of thinking in the last week prepping for this, the world has kind of become perhaps a little bit more effeminate over the last 30 years, as in all the training we do is far more aligned to how I would like to lead than how I saw men predominantly lead 30 years, 25 years ago. And so actually I think even in the construction engineering industry, are in a much better place where you can show all sides of yourself. Obviously, you always are professional, and I've gone into lots of different situations where I haven't known everything. But as long as I share my experience and I'm true to myself, and I ask questions when I don't know, and I'm honest when I don't know things, I've never found that a problem.
I think we are getting a lot better gender balance through the construction and engineering industry. It's actually really exciting times, and to walk into a project and I have sort of waiting for me a project manager of our specialist lifts is a woman. And one of our crane drivers, is going to sit up in the tower crane all day, is a woman. Things are changing, and it's just really great. And it does change the dynamics in a team, and it does put, dare I say it, sort of the guys a bit on the back foot, saying this is not unique to them. Anyone can do this, and anyone can get involved. And I think I'm just sort of the last bastion of, where we don't have that balance, unfortunately, is in a lot of our admin assistants, where I don't know of a male admin assistant we have in this building.
No, you're right. We have got women in most roles now in engineering. There's still a way to go before it's 50-50. I mean, our graduate intake is almost 50-50, but higher up the organisation it isn't. And I think the difference it will make in the role models that we show the next generation coming up, the more women that they're exposed to doing tech roles, the more likely they are to go down that career path. It'll just make for more collaboration, hopefully a more positive atmosphere, and a more fun place to work for the men and the women.
We actually perform better.
Yeah.
I think we perform a lot better in a team on our projects, on our delivery, because, everybody steps up.
Yeah.
We're looking forward to getting to know Emma and Caroline and continuing our conversation during the live Q&A session. So stay tuned, find that Q&A button on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen, and bring all of your questions.
So happy to have you here, Emma and Caroline. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for sharing that incredible session between the two of you with over 200 people all across the world, which is a wonderful audience. So how are you both feeling having just watched it? What are your initial thoughts, feelings?
Yeah, it was quite weird watching ourselves back. I don't listen to myself very often. I felt I looked like my little sister too much of the time.
Yeah.
But no, it was really good, and kind of as a nice summary of what we'd put together over a whole day. Seeing it all together was great, and feels really positive.
That's great. And Caroline, how about you?
Yeah, likewise. It's always weird to see yourself on screen. So it was a really good experience, and it was really good to sort of hear it again. I think some of the things that Emma and I discussed was really interesting, sharing our history as well between us, because we with Bechtel we did an out of contact, so it was really good, really fun.
Yeah, I mean, I was taking a bunch of notes about good and bad leadership and different examples of utilizing different styles of leadership, communication, learning. It was really insightful. So just to quickly introduce myself, my name is Vanessa Raquel-Raponi. Thank you all so much for being here today. I've been moderating the last few panels, and myself and my colleagues were the feature set in the very first episode. So I am a product development engineer in my third year working at Spin Master, which is a toy manufacturing company. So I made everything from board games to plush teddy bears to kinetic sand. So I have a lovely breadth there. And I also was the founder of ENGIqueers Canada, which is an LGBTQ engineering organization. And I am located in Canada right now, chatting with these folks in England. So I also wanted to share that I do have a YouTube channel these days. So I'll send that link in the chat if anyone would like to check out more about diversity and inclusion from a queer woman of color. But what I think has excited me so much about this and this conversation in particular is related to this concept of the differences in leadership styles. So we have a wonderful amount of questions, and this first one, we'll get right to it, and it's from Anne Marie. And it's asking, with so much more work now being done remotely, what have you had to adapt to build those relationships now that you are no longer being co-located? And I know this is something I've really struggled with, so I'm really interested to hear what you think.
You want to go first?
It's a great question, and yeah, I saw it in the questions coming up, and I was just trying to think about it in that it is much harder, you know, going through a screen. But we've done, and looking back over this last year, we've done so many new contacts with new customers in this way, and in some ways you have that more instant access, and you get to see a bit more insight into people's own homes. That breaks some barriers. It's odd. It helps to break some barriers, and you can immediately create some different connections to then discuss with, you know, someone you haven't met before. So there's some upsides to it, but it's not the same as you know. For me in business development, you like to break the ice with a cup of coffee or something, or, you know, go to a coffee bar. Or, so there's none of that. But I think that there are some positives in it. Emma, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I've been in a slightly different situation. I've been working with a team I was already working with last year and had been working with for a while, although we brought a few new people in. So I've been quite, as kind of said in the video, I was missing that one-to-one time that you can spend with people. What I've tried to do is, when I have been talking in a smaller group or just with one other colleague, to try and take that time at the beginning of a conversation to just see how they're doing. I've got a colleague in New Delhi at the moment who's obviously going through the mill yet again. But then I met a new vendor on the phone only last Friday, who it then turned out was in Barcelona. So they were just releasing their lockdown over the weekend, and we had a bit of a chat about Barcelona. So trying to, wherever possible, have those little bits of informal chat before you get down to business, but trying to make a more conscious effort to do that, because it can be so easy just to try and get the job done as quickly as possible.
I've definitely noticed that's a big change in the Zoom world, where you're just on meetings back to back to back, and then you forget to be like, oh, by the way, how's it going? So it's definitely good advice. And I've noticed that there's been a lot of creative solutions to bridge that gap of, I think I'm going to a virtual paint night in a couple weeks where, you know, everyone goes to their local dollar store, buy some paint. So I think people are finding creative solutions, but it's definitely very intentional these days.
Yeah.
Okay, so our next question is really great. So this is about the importance of communication. So do either of our speakers have any tips or recommendations for non-native English speakers to recognize the different types of communication that different people respond to? Definitely very challenging.
Yeah, really good. It's so I think we're lucky in some respects in Bechtel, in that we are exposed to, especially when you're on projects overseas, lots of different nationalities, and in some cases, you know, for us as English speakers, we become the minority, and sort of, it's quite good to sort of have that feeling. And yes, the need to understand those different styles of communication and how different people sort of fit into sort of different quadrants, really. So there are many different sort of tests out on the websites. Fortunately, with Bechtel, we have facilitators come in and train and sort of give us, you know, what are the different styles, and know what your style is, and therefore what you need to do to flex, to adapt to others. You know, it's the things of, you know, how some purist engineers, you know, they like detail and you can't speed them up. As a project manager myself, and as you sort of, we want to hurry on, we want to get to the end result immediately. And, you know, but when we're talking to engineers, we've got to allow them the time. And when we're, you know, sort of when people are talking to us or giving us, they've got to sort of like make it succinct and give us the answer sort of. So learning those is really, really helpful.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's a good point, Caroline. And I don't think it's particularly to do with whether English is your first language or not. I mean, I work with lots of people for whom, whether they're living in England or living in Egypt or living in New Delhi, where English may or may not be their first language. So there's always the trying to make sure you speak clearly and you're actually being understood. But to what Caroline was saying, there are just so many. It's more learning about the individual person and how they want to be spoken to. I once had a very senior manager that if you didn't go in with reams of data to back up your argument, you might as well not bother. As Caroline said, people that like to get into the real detail, and whereas if someone is coming to me with a problem, I'm like, well, start at the high level and then we'll dig down. Let's not get in at the bottom and I've got no idea what you're talking about. So it's more understanding the person rather than where in the world they happen to come from.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, I would definitely always recommend paying attention to things like body language and how people are responding. Are they smiling and happy? Are they looking frustrated and, you know, eager to move on to the next topic, and paying attention to the types of questions they're asking and seeing how the next time you can preemptively prepare for what types of questions they might ask.
Yeah. And of course, that's been much harder this year where so many meetings have been on Teams or Zoom, and often with, in my case, often with cameras off with the client.
Oh yeah,
they're really poor at putting the cameras on, so you haven't even got body language to pick up on. You've got to listen to the tone of their voice and hope you're gauging it right.
100%. Definitely some unique challenges in this COVID world. This has been a popular theme throughout the last few episodes. Question is, did you ever have imposter syndrome as a leader, and how did you overcome that to have the confidence to lead your team?
Constantly. I say it never goes away. You're always sort of thinking, should I be here? Am I good enough to do this? And it's that inner voice in your head that's sort of always questioning whether you can do it. But it's constant. I don't have an answer for it. It's yeah, I don't think I have an answer. Emma, do you have a response?
No, I mean, I'm still amazed sometimes I'm allowed to get away with things. It's like, oh, I can make that decision myself, can I? I don't have to ask 3 other people and get it signed off in triplicate. And I can come up with ideas and people say, oh, that's a really good idea, let's get on with it. So yeah, I'm still, I guess I'm now looking back going, actually, I'm that age that people expect me to be leading and doing these things. And perhaps I'm not stepping up to the mark enough, because I always think of myself as sort of 20 years ago. So yeah, I think I don't think it's something you get over. And I look at people more senior than me and think, well, of course they know what they're doing. And well, perhaps they don't know any more than I do. They're just better at blagging it than I am.
I've definitely noticed over the last while in this kind of EDI space that it's so common, regardless of your age, regardless of your industry. And I find for me, the more I learn about it, the more I'm able to recognize it while it's happening. And the whole basis of imposter syndrome is knowing that it's invalid. Like, you factually have the certification, you factually are qualified enough, you're just questioning it yourself. So I find for me, it's helpful to kind of know that. So I'm like, oh, Vanessa, you're just in your head again. Like, it's okay. But definitely knowing you're not alone, I find is helpful from a community standpoint to know that none of us is alone, for sure.
Yeah.
This one, I mean, we'll probably reword this as we answer it, but the question is, do you think that women are better listeners than men? And if so, just in general, do you have any tips regarding how to help people become better listeners? So I doubt we'll compare too much, but in general, what kind of you've observed here over your time in your career?
Some people definitely listen more than others, and there are times when I know I listen quite well and times when I probably don't. Again, I think one of the problems with the fact that we spent a year back to back on Teams meetings is you're not always actively listening, and then you get caught out and they go, "Oh, and Emma, what do you think about that?" And you go, "Oh, sugar, I wasn't listening properly. I was trying to do something else because then I've got to go to another meeting." Whereas actually, if you're in the room, I think it's much easier to listen. I remember we had the senior manager who really liked the data. He would really hammer home that you had to be in the room. You know, if anybody was found under the table with their little phone sending text messages, they would be in serious trouble. And he would look around the room and call out the person that didn't look like they were listening properly. So that was really good training that, you know, if you're in a meeting, you really should be listening and paying attention, because you're in the room for a reason and you won't find out what that reason is if you don't listen. So I think that was good training for me, which I need to refresh when we do get back in the room, and I probably need to do more when we're online to make sure I'm listening. And I guess calling out is one way of doing that, is if you think your colleagues are not listening, is you wake them up again.
Yeah. Caroline, any thoughts?
Yeah, it's and you're absolutely right. I think over this time we're not doing as well as we were before in listening. The back-to-back meetings, it's so easy to be multitasking and not giving your full attention to any of it. So it is something that we've got to think about. How do we retrain ourselves? I think is one thing. It's and also the one thing it's key when we're talking to new customers or with customers and we're trying to win work, is you do need to really hear them and play it back.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it's to make sure you've understood them correctly. And this environment is very hard. And I think once you get into sort of that project mode, I think it's different when we're sort of selling work, but when you're into the project mode, you really do need to be, you know, right on your toes, listening and hearing and playing back. Can you teach yourself? I think it's sort of like knowing that recognizing some of those things, that you're being impatient, you want to jump in, hold yourself back, say, what have I heard? You know, have I and I have to write notes all the time. I have to write everything down, which also helps in the recall.
Definitely. And to me, I think it's instead of a matter of women versus men, I think it's just a matter of going back to the theme of different types of communication, different types of learning. I know for me, for instance, I'm not a strong auditory learner. I'm a much more visual person. So that can translate to listening being difficult, because I'd rather read than hear. So I think that maybe historically there were some comments about very charismatic leadership styles historically. So maybe it was a kind of overlay of the folks who were in charge and their types of personality, and where listening fits into that as well. Great. Well, great feedback there. This is a great question, very close to my heart, taking a very intersectional lens on femininity. So what kind of initiatives do you have in place to encourage the development of diverse leadership talent at all levels? Specifically, what are you doing to lift up other women, for example, BIPOCs, so Black, Indigenous, people of color, as well as persons with disabilities?
We've still got quite a way to go, but I think we keep on making steps in our programs and with our HR in being more aware of diversity. And therefore, I think, you know, some of the things we were introducing more recently is that when we're doing interviews for positions now, that they're ensuring it's a diverse panel of people. So we're doing, we're finding out things, we're making adjustments to our program and trying to improve it. We've still got a lot of work to do. you know, we've got a long way to go, but, you know, we do have, and we have to learn. I think each organisation has to learn what's right for them and how they can build that up. Yeah, Emma, what's your thinking on that?
Yeah, so I'm on our diversity and inclusion panel for my business unit, so it's Houston and London primarily, and I've also been involved in some UK work with our other business lines, looking at, you know, mainly on a male. In the UK, we've been focusing more on men and women. We have to, by law, publish data every year to the government, all companies above a certain size, of the number of, on average, pay of women versus men, overall, but also broken down into quartiles. And as I think I said in the video, you know, we're not doing too badly at the bottom quartile, but it drops off dramatically going up. So we've been looking at, you know, what can we do as an organization to encourage women to stay, but also to attract women at the sort of mid-career level. And so one thing that's happening globally is sort of diverse panels for interviewing. But we're also just looking at introducing all-female talent days where senior managers look at all the women in the office and go, well, has everybody got a career plan? Have they all been in their role for a sensible amount of time, or have they got stuck? Can we unstick them to get a bit more attention? And then looking at how do we get people out on assignment? Are people overlooked for assignment because they're a woman and it's assumed they don't want to go? Or are people given a fair crack at the whip, as it were? Back in my early days, a lot of our assignments were in places where it was all male camps, and so I wasn't allowed to go. So I lost out at that point. Caroline managed to go to one country that they let her in, although she was the only one there. But that, you know, that's the international environment's a lot better now, but we still got to make the effort. So, you know, we've got a way to go, and I think, like a lot of engineering companies, because we've done benchmarking against competitors, they're not doing much better than we are. In the US, they're doing a lot more on the race, you know, variety of ethnic backgrounds, and again, that there's certainly still work to go on that as well. So we're making a lot of positive steps in the last year, but there's still a long way to go.
I think just on that as well, I think the other thing is that, you know, with this pandemic, our company was never flexible about working from home, and we've been thrown into this, and we've all had to learn to make it work. And the company's now taking a different view that it does work, and in a lot of cases, it's, you know, it's more productive. So we'll find a new balance, but that new balance also will facilitate more women staying and giving them more flexibility in work hours as well. So that's going to hopefully help in retaining women in our organisation, and you know, giving a lot more flexibility to them.
Definitely.
Absolutely, it gives us what a lot of my colleagues in different industries were allowed to do when they came back from maternity leave, for example, of working from home 1 or 2 days a week and in the office the rest of the time, is now going to become our normal way of operating, regardless of what age or race or gender you are. And I think it'll help the men as well, who are having small babies and also don't want to be away from home all day, every day. So yeah, it's a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. The world is going to look very different in a few years or very even a few months. I know that for me, one thing I always try to point out very frequently is we often have these conversations in silos, like, okay, we need to talk about people of different races, then we need to talk about people of different disabilities, then we need to talk about women. But there exist women with disabilities and women who are Black and Black women with disabilities. So it's kind of just recognizing that we are much more complex as individuals, and it's okay to have these conversations in tandem because you're talking about the same individual people at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
So it's definitely intersectionality is a great lens to try to apply. This is a great one. So this is from Angie. How has being in the engineering field been more challenging for you as a female or a female in leadership? what advice would you give specifically to a girl starting out in her engineering career to prepare herself for a less diverse environment?
Wow.
Well, I think if so, I went to an all-girls school once for a careers evening, and there were all these different people dotted around the room with all different backgrounds, and girls from the age of 12 to 18 were coming over and going, "Oh, what's it like being whatever you are?" So I was in the little engineering corner, and they said, "Oh, what's it like working in quite a male-dominated environment?" And I really had to stop and think, but partly because from the age of 16, I've only ever existed in a male-dominated environment.
Right.
Because the moment you choose in the UK system to do maths, physics, and chemistry at A level, which is our exams we take at 18, you're in a minority, being a woman, and then you do an engineering degree, you're in an even more minority, and then you go to work and you're still in the minority. So it's kind of all I've ever known, but hopefully we'll get more diverse as time goes on. And really, I try not, I mean, most of my career, I mean, I've been thinking about it a lot because of this thing in the last few days, but most of my career, it's made no difference whatsoever. You just be yourself. I guess the biggest advice I give to all new engineers, regardless of gender or race, is just ask questions. Learn from everybody. There's never a stupid question. Just keep asking questions and keep learning and be yourself.
Love it. Caroline, anything to add?
Yeah, so yeah, when I started out, it didn't even occur to me that I was the woman on site or in engineering, you know, because like Emma, you know, it was what I was used to. I didn't think about that there was a gap, to be honest, and I didn't think that it was. No, I didn't feel that anybody on site, you know, went into work thinking, "Oh, that's a woman." That didn't occur, and I think there is still a bit of perception, sort of thinking that, you know, this engineering construction, that there's not a lot of women in there. And I think when you peel back the layers, you'll find that it's actually not much better than it was when Emma and I first started. There's a lot more women through all different aspects. And as I mentioned, you sort of have a crane driver, or, you know, I had this Dutch company that heavy specialist lifts, and the project manager for them was a woman. So, you know, you're going to find it through all different levels. There is more women there. There are more role models there, and really be yourself, and, you know, just do your best, ask questions and enjoy it, because engineering is fun, construction's fun. You get to experience a lot of different things. You've got a lot of versatility and flexibility as well.
Yeah, I agree entirely, and I think that it's been an impressive change over time, and even in just the short decade or so I've been from a student to the workforce, I have seen a large amount of change, especially in how we have these conversations, our focus on them, etc. But I know that one piece of advice I've always found helpful is to focus on the work first and foremost. People are always going to respond to someone who cares about their job, takes time, regardless of who you are and what your background is. And when you're doing so well at your job, it's forcing people to be like, oh, well, now I have to challenge some assumptions because you're producing this great work and I'm a results-driven person as a leader and I value that. And now I'm, you know, more likely to sit beside you and ask more personal questions, get to know you. So I think they're all very interconnected. All right, I think we're at our final question now, just for the sake of time. And this one is going to be about tips for interacting with leaders who are still working in these historical styles and might be a bit of an alpha male, if you will. Any last recos for that?
I can respond to it now, because yeah, they are still there. They are still present. I still haven't learned how to deal with them. I'm being honest, is sort of you still go back to sort of being sometimes you find it hard to challenge them, but you do try and find ways of having the discussions or bring the discussions round, but there is still that sort of that fear of authority. Yeah, or you know, they'll not take it in the right way. So yeah, that we still have in our organisation.
Yeah, but back to what you were just saying, Vanessa, results. If you can produce the results, that definitely makes it easier. And sometimes the slightly scarier ones, I keep trying to remember they're human beings too.
Yeah.
You know, they have to eat and drink and, you know, have families and friends, and they're not an alien species. Although sometimes it's hard to imagine. But yeah, I've worked with a few people not so long ago who many of my male colleagues were warning me, you know, this person almost makes people cry in meetings. And actually I've had they've been absolutely fine with me. And I've tried to go in eyes open, but be professional, and not had a problem. So yeah, you just have to take each person as they come and try and be as professional as you can, whoever.
Yeah, just default to, all right, if I have to ask a couple questions about the golf games and the, you know, how your kids are doing, it'll help us become a little bit more casual with each other.
Indeed. And yes, that was my daughter who just poked her head around the door.
Yeah.
She needs to go to bed.
Hello to all of us. All right, well, this has been fantastic. I'll leave it to both of you to share some final remarks. I know for me, my key takeaways are definitely to think more about the differences people have on a personal basis, and to keep an open mind and try to recognize that I still have value in my own unique style, and to bring that forward to light. Caroline, Emma, either of you have any thoughts?
Well, it's just been a really interesting day, and I've been trying to keep an eye on the little comments popping up. So being able to talk to an audience all over North America has been a great opportunity. So thank you for having us along. I hope it's been interesting for people, and really good questions. So yeah, certainly going through this whole process has really made me kind of evaluate my style and how it's come about. So it's been a really interesting thought process.
Great. Well, I'm sure all of us would love to have you as a leader one day. So thank you for representing so strongly. And Caroline, what about you?
Yeah, again, thank you for involving me in this. It's been a fantastic experience. Like Emma said, you know, I've really enjoyed it, and making ourselves think about, you know, what is the mindset and the leadership styles, and where it's been embedded in us. It's been really good a good experience. And, you know, let's hope that, you know, in a few years' time that we're not having to work this gap, that it's a lot more natural, and that we have the diversity in our workplace that matches the diversity in our surrounding cultures. So, you know, we're getting there, but that's, you know, that's where we'd like to end up. Thank you.
I love it. A message of hope to keep us all going on a Wednesday. All right. Well, all the best to everyone all over the world. Thank you so much for joining us. And we have a little closing screen. So your feedback is very valuable to us. Please feel free to go to the website tinyurl.com/maypersist to leave your thoughts, and to come join us again next time for June 9th, which is the day after my birthday. So very exciting. And we'll be having our 5th episode there. So hope to see you soon. Oh, and Wendy, I'll reshare my YouTube channel link just for you. All the best, everybody.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Thank you.